I'm Audrey Erickson with Mead Johnson Nutrition. We specialize in giving children their best start in life around the globe, and we're very proud of what we do. Today I'm very proud to introduce to you someone who's really made a difference for the food and agricultural sector. We're very fortunate to be joined this morning by Ambassador Darci Vetter, Chief Agriculture Negotiator for the food and agricultural sector on so many agreements. Now, what you might not know about Darci is that if you pick any agreement that has been important to our sector, Darci's been at the epicenter. Either she personally negotiated it, she drove them to the finish line, or she's implemented them, or all three. And today we're going to learn a little bit about how she's so skillfully achieved that in so many ways. And if I were a stock market analyst, I think I would give her a AAA rating. And that AAA stands for accessing markets. She's been very focused on that, on everything she's done. Addressing issues, most importantly, and I think some of us in the audience might know there are a few issues in agriculture from time to time. And then most importantly, advancing the interests of our sector. So it is my sheer pleasure today to welcome Ambassador Darci Vetter. Welcome.
Stop there. That was such a great introduction. Thanks to all of you for coming out this morning and for being here to dive in a little bit deeper on what TPP has to offer for agriculture. This really is a unique agreement in terms of the countries around the table as well as the standards we've been able to achieve. So I'm going to give you sort of the Cliff Notes version as to why this is so important for agriculture and what we have achieved, so that we have plenty of time for Q&A and for our other panelists to share their perspectives as well. I realize I don't have a clicker. Oh, here we go. Excellent. So let's sort of dive right in. TPP has 40% of the world's GDP around one table, negotiating together to better integrate their markets. And it is the highest standard trade agreement in history. The rules that we were able to achieve, the fact that every product is touched. American farmers and ranchers, again, unprecedented access to these agricultural markets. 2/3 of the world's middle class and that middle class demand that comes with it, that buying power, will be in this region by 2030. And TPP is the economic cornerstone of our forward policy approach to our pivot to Asia. Again, an incredibly dynamic region, not only economically but politically as well, and we are able through this agreement to really affect key values, to make sure the agreement reflects things that are incredibly important to us, as well as integrate our economies. And so you can see the list of the nations who are there. And I think it's worth mentioning that about half of those countries are countries with whom we already had free trade agreements. But this gave us an opportunity to raise the standards of those agreements as well. You know, we've had an agreement with our NAFTA partners for 20 years now, but when we did the NAFTA, it was revolutionary to include labor and environment standards as a side agreement. That was the first of its kind. Now we've brought NAFTA up to the standard we expect by putting those standards directly in the agreement and raising our expectations for what they cover. So again, this is a pretty interesting region. 40% of the US exports already go to TPP partners, 42% of our agricultural exports go there. So even if we didn't expand trade through this agreement, just by bringing the tariffs down, we would put more profit in the pockets of our agricultural producers with everything we sell by getting rid of those tariff barriers. But of course, when you integrate markets this way, you also expect real expansion there as well. But these are important partners who are deepening their relationship with us. And they're growing partners. If you look in particular at the TPP partners of Vietnam and Malaysia, Vietnam has 90 million customers already, a rapidly growing population, and a population where a higher and higher percentage of the citizens of Vietnam are joining the middle class every year. So by 2030, the region will have 66% of the world's middle class and 59% of middle class consumption. And that's important because when people enter the middle class, they change what they eat. So this change is important in all sorts of consumer areas, but most important in food and agriculture. Right now we sell a lot of sort of primary products, for example, to Vietnam. We sell a lot of skim milk powder, for example. We sell grains and oil seeds, basic commodities. What we're going to see is a much higher demand for protein, again, as incomes increase, the quality of the calories that they want to consume. Fresh fruits and vegetables become a bigger part of the diet, a place where we also have an advantage. So we think we'll sell them not only more of those primary products to expand their own livestock industries and keep meeting nutritional needs, but we're going to directly sell them the protein as well. A number of the countries in this region are land limited, so if they want to increase their protein consumption, they're going to have to import a lot of that directly, and we excel in those areas, in pork, in poultry, and dairy, so we see huge opportunity. And I think it's important to note that the lure of the TPP, a high standard agreement, 12 key economies, made sure that we could put on the table every agricultural product without exception. Every ag tariff line is liberalized here. And that's not what you typically see with a number of the countries at the table. Canada, in order to be part of TPP, was willing to put dairy, poultry, and eggs on the table, something we couldn't get from the Canada FTA and from NAFTA. Japan put its sacred agricultural sectors on the table, something that is left out of previous FTAs. We have new access in rice and pork and beef and dairy that would have not been achieved before. And it's, again, the dynamism of those economies that allowed them to do that, that gave us that leverage. And Brunei, Japan, Malaysia, New Zealand, and Vietnam are the countries with whom we don't already have free trade agreements. They collectively will eliminate duties on 93% of their ag tariff lines. 70% of them will be eliminated immediately. And for those that are not fully eliminated, again, we see liberalization in every line. And TPP is also important because we have created new and higher standard rules in some areas that have not been addressed before. SPS issues. We worked very closely with our industry to say, as tariffs have gone down around the world, as trade flows have increased, SPS issues have sort of taken their place as some of the most difficult barriers. TPP raises standards in terms of the commitment to making decisions based on science, to using risk analysis, to transparency, providing notice and comment in rulemaking on SPS rules, something we take for granted here but don't have elsewhere. A consultation mechanism to make sure when problems arise that we can try to solve them rapidly with trade and scientific officials at the table together, working collaboratively. It's the first agreement to ever have provisions on geographical indications. Our dairy and our meat industries in particular see policies from Europe where they are using their free trade agreements to protect these geographical indications, these product names like Parmigiano Reggiano that reflect a place, but to protect them in a way that we believe is overly broad and goes into generics, suggesting that generic names like Parmesan, Feta, and others shouldn't be able to be sold, despite the fact that our industries have done a lot of work to build markets in those countries. So geographical indications provisions require countries to allow for opposition procedures and cancellation procedures if that overly broad protection is being suggested.